For 3 years, Victoria Monroe thought she was living a fairy tale, standing in Julian Westbrook's Upper East Side penthouse, with Manhattan twinkling below like a carpet of diamonds. It was hard to believe otherwise. She was dating a billionaire, the kind of man you only read about in magazines. Julian was 32, impossibly handsome, and had taken his father's real estate empire and doubled its worth. He was the king of New York, and Tori, an art teacher from Brooklyn, was his queen. She loved the quiet moments with him, away from the cameras and the high society crowds. Those were the moments that felt real, the moments where he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. She held on to those moments, building a future on them, believing their love was strong enough to conquer the cynical world they moved in. The annual charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum was the highlight of the social calendar. Tori had spent weeks preparing, finally choosing a midnight blue gown that made her feel like a movie star. She wanted to look perfect, to stand by Julian's side and silence the whispers of the society women who saw her as just a temporary fixture. The Grand Hall was a spectacle of crystal and roses, filled with the city's most powerful people. This was Julian's world, a world she was still trying to navigate. But that night, something was off. Julian was distant, his eyes constantly glued to his phone. His replies were short, his mind clearly somewhere else. Tori tried to brush it off. He was stressed about a new project, she told herself. The price of ambition was high, and she was willing to pay it with him. Needing a moment to herself, Tori slipped away to the restroom. The opulence of the marble and gold fixtures was almost suffocating. She took a deep breath, retouched her lipstick, and forced a smile in the mirror before heading back. As she approached the Grand Hall, she heard Julian's voice from a secluded terrace. A woman's light laugh followed, and a cold dread began to creep into Tori's heart. Peeking around the corner, her worst fears materialized. Julian was with Vanessa Hartley, a blonde heiress whose family was practically royalty. They stood intimately close, Vanessa's hand resting on his chest. Tori's mind screamed that it was innocent, that she was overreacting. But then Julian leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a polite social kiss. It was deep and passionate, a kiss that shattered Tori's world in a single, devastating moment. Her first instinct wasn't to confront him, but to seek understanding. She found Julian's father, Thomas, a man who had always shown her kindness. But when she hesitantly asked him about Julian and Vanessa, his friendly demeanor vanished. He looked at her with a chilling mix of pity and dismissal. He explained it to her like a business transaction. Marriages in their circle were strategic alliances. Vanessa's family connections were crucial for Julian's new project. Tori, he said, was a lovely girl, but she was just a phase. Julian needed someone from his own world. The words hit her like physical blows. A phase, a placeholder, temporary amusement. Every promise, every shared dream, it was all a lie. She was disposable. When Julian finally found her by the champagne fountain, there was no apology in his eyes, only irritation. He didn't comfort her. He accused her of making a scene, of embarrassing him. His voice was cold and harsh as he told her she was being childish, that she'd always known what their relationship was. He had never promised her forever, he sneered. He said she should be grateful for the lifestyle he'd given her. Without him, she was nothing but a struggling artist. The cruelty was breathtaking. The man she loved, the man she had built her life around, was a stranger. Standing there in her beautiful gown, surrounded by New York's elite, she had never felt so utterly alone, so completely worthless. The dream had become a nightmare. Tori walked out of the gala and didn't look back. She walked 4 miles through the city streets, the elegant gown a mockery of the evening's disaster. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from her best friend, but she couldn't speak to anyone. She had to feel the full, crushing weight of the pain before she could even think about what came next. The next morning, with the cold light of dawn filtering into her apartment, she made a decision. She wasn't going to fight. She wasn't going to try to win back a man who had treated her like a commodity. She had lost something far more important than Julian had lost herself. She quit her job, broke her lease, and poured her life savings into a one-way ticket to Paris. It was the city she had always dreamed of, the heart of the art world she so loved. She wouldn't be going as Julian's girlfriend, seeking his validation. She would be going as Victoria Monroe, an artist ready to rediscover who she was meant to be on her own terms. As the plane climbed into the sky, leaving the glittering skyline of New York behind, a sense of calm settled over her. The future was a blank canvas, both terrifying and exhilarating. The pain was still there, a deep ache in her chest, but beneath it, something new was beginning to stir. The woman who loved Julian Westbrook was gone, left behind in the wreckage of a shattered fairy tale. From those ashes, someone fierce and unbreakable was about to rise. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. 2 years had passed since Victoria Monroe stepped off that plane at Charles de Gaulle Airport with one suitcase and a broken heart. Paris in the spring had wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and slowly, painfully, she had learned to breathe again. The tiny apartment in La Mer became her sanctuary, with its creaking wooden floors and windows that opened onto a street filled with cafes and boutiques. Every morning, she woke to the smell of fresh bread from the bakery below and the sound of French conversations drifting up through her window. The first 6 months had been the hardest. Tori cried more than she thought possible. She walked along the Seine for hours, sat in Luxembourg Gardens, watching children play, and spent long afternoons in museums staring at paintings until her eyes hurt. But somewhere between the tears and the art, something inside her began to shift. The pain that had threatened to destroy her started to transform into something else entirely. It became fuel. Tori enrolled in a fashion design program at the prestigious institute Franquet de la Mode. Back in New York, she had always sketched in her spare time, filling notebooks with dress designs and fabric ideas. But her ex Julian had always dismissed it as a cute little hobby, something not to be taken seriously. In Paris, surrounded by people who lived and breathed creativity, Tori discovered she had real talent. Her professors praised her eye for color and her ability to blend classic elegance with a modern edge. She stopped being Tori, the diminutive nickname that made her sound like someone's little sister. She became Victoria, a name that commanded respect. She cut her long, dark hair into a sleek bob that framed her face perfectly. She learned to dress with Parisian sophistication, favoring clean lines and quality fabrics over flashy labels. She even took up boxing at a gym in the 11th arrondissement. Building a physical strength that matched the new strength growing in her spirit, Victoria's designs began to attract attention. She started small, creating custom pieces for friends and fellow students. Her signature style emerged naturally. She combined structured tailoring with unexpected feminine details, creating clothes that made women feel powerful and beautiful at the same time. Her pieces had an edge to them, a subtle rebellion against the idea that women had to choose between strength and grace. During Victoria's second year abroad, her best friend Rachel flew to Paris for a visit. She barely recognized the woman who met her at the airport. Gone was the uncertain girl who had measured her worth by Julian's approval. In her place stood a confident woman who moved through the world with purpose and determination. Rachel, now working in fashion PR in New York, saw immediately what Victoria had created. She convinced Victoria to show her collection at a small showcase during Paris Fashion Week. It was a modest venue. Nothing like the major runway shows, but the right people were there. A buyer from Bergdorf Goodman placed an order. A fashion blogger with millions of followers posted photos that went viral. By the end of the week, Victoria Monroe had officially launched her brand. The next 18 months were a whirlwind. Victoria opened a small atelier in Paris with 2 seamstresses. Orders came in faster than they could fill them. Fashion magazines started featuring her designs. Celebrities began requesting custom pieces for red carpet events. Victoria poured every ounce of herself into the work, building something that belonged entirely to her. She partnered with ethical manufacturers, ensured fair wages, and created a brand that stood for female empowerment. The money started to come in more than Victoria had ever imagined. She paid back every cent she had borrowed, helped her sister Grace with her student loans, and still had enough to expand. She hired a business manager, moved into a larger atelier, and started planning her first flagship store. And through it all, she thought about New York less and less. Julian became a ghost from another life, a painful lesson that had taught her exactly who she never wanted to be again. The invitation arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Bergdorf Goodman wanted Victoria to design an exclusive capsule collection for their New York store. More than that, they wanted her to be a featured designer at their annual fashion gala, showcasing her work alongside established industry giants. It was the kind of opportunity that could cement her place in the fashion world for good. Rachel called her immediately, practically screaming with excitement. Victoria stood in her bustling atelier, holding the cream-colored invitation, and felt her stomach twist. Returning to New York meant the possibility of seeing Julian. 2 years had passed, and she had worked so hard to build a life where he didn't matter. But the thought of being in the same city, breathing the same air, made her chest tighten. Then she looked around at what she had created. The sketches pinned to the walls. The fabric samples spread across tables. The team of talented people who believed in her vision. She was not the same woman who had fled New York in tears. She had built an empire from the ashes of heartbreak. She had turned pain into power. And she would not let the ghost of Julian Westbrook keep her from claiming what she had earned. Victoria accepted the invitation. The Bergdorf Goodman Gala was everything Victoria remembered about New York society events, but multiplied by 10. The store's entire 7th floor had been transformed into a sophisticated showcase space. Models wearing her designs walked among the guests like living mannequins that brought her vision to life. Her collection was bold and beautiful, each piece telling a story of resilience and reinvention. Victoria wore her own creation, a stunning black dress with strategic cutouts that revealed glimpses of skin without being obvious. The fabric moved like liquid shadow, and the cut made her look both elegant and dangerous. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like money, success, and confidence all rolled into one. Rachel stood by her side, seamlessly playing the dual role of publicist and best friend. Photographers clamored for pictures. Fashion editors wanted interviews. Buyers wanted to place new orders. Victoria handled it all with a practiced grace, smiling and chatting while her eyes scanned the room. She told herself she was not looking for Julian. She told herself it didn't matter if he was there. She almost believed it. And then, while she was speaking with the fashion director of Vogue, she felt it, a prickle at the back of her neck that told her someone was watching. She turned slowly, knowing somehow exactly what she would see. Julian Westbrook stood near the champagne bar, completely frozen, staring at her like she was an apparition. He looked older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. His hair had a touch of gray at the temples. He was still handsome, still perfectly dressed in his custom suit, but there was something diminished about him. He looked smaller somehow, as if all his success hadn't filled him up the way he thought it would. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Victoria felt her heart rate spike, but her expression remained perfectly calm. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, planned what she would say, what she would do. But now that it was actually happening, she felt surprisingly empty. Not angry, not sad, just distant. Like looking at a stranger who happened to have her ex-boyfriend's face. Julian started moving toward her. Victoria watched him approach, noting the uncertainty in his steps. He was nervous. Julian Westbrook, the man who had dismissed her so cruelly, who had made her feel utterly worthless, was nervous to face her. The realization sent a quiet rush of satisfaction through her veins. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to speak privately but not close enough to touch. Up close she could see he looked tired, successful and wealthy and tired. Julian spoke first, his voice softer than she remembered. "Victoria, you look incredible. I heard you were doing well in Paris, but this." He gestured around at the gala, at her designs on display, at the buzz of admiration surrounding her name. Victoria smiled, the polite, professional smile she now reserved for business acquaintances. "Thank you, Julian." She kept her voice level and pleasant, as if he were just another guest at her event. "Are you enjoying the gala?" The casualness of her tone seemed to throw him completely off balance. He had clearly expected anger or tears, or at least some acknowledgement of their shared past. Instead, she was treating him like a stranger who meant nothing. Which, Victoria realized with a sense of finality, was exactly what he had become. For 2 weeks, it felt like Julian was haunting her. Everywhere Victoria went in New York, he was there, the little coffee shop by her hotel. Julian pretending he'd just discovered it. The gallery opening she was dragged to. Julian mingling as if they were still a couple. The restaurant where she was meeting investors. Julian trying to catch her eye from across the room. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a campaign. He was tracking her, inserting himself into her life with the same relentless focus he used for business deals. Victoria found it almost funny. The man who tossed her aside like an old newspaper was now clinging to every scrap of her attention. He sent mountains of flowers to her hotel, lavish bouquets of roses and orchids that she immediately had the staff donate to a local hospital. He left desperate messages with her friend Rachel, begging for just 5 minutes. He even ambushed her morning run in Central Park, feigning surprise to see her on that exact path. Each time, her response was the same: a polite, firm no. No, thank you. I appreciate the gesture, but no. I'm afraid I have meetings all day. Her calm, almost indifferent rejections seemed to fuel his desperation. Julian Westbrook wasn't used to being told no, especially not by a woman he once so thoroughly controlled. The climax arrived on her last morning in the city. At a business breakfast, Julian cornered her. Before she could protest, he slid into the booth across from her, waving away the confused restaurant manager. His eyes were intense, almost wild, a stark contrast to the cool, collected businessmen she remembered. "Victoria, please," he began, his voice cracking. "Just hear me out. I made a terrible mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. I've thought about you every single day for 2 years." Victoria slowly set down her coffee cup. She looked at him with the cool, appraising gaze she used for subpar fabric samples. "Interesting," she said, her voice even. "I haven't thought about you at all." The words hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. Impossible. They had spent 3 years together. How could she not have thought about him? What Julian couldn't possibly know, blinded as he was by his own arrogance, was that Victoria's success was about to collide with his empire. The massive Hudson Yards project, the very deal he'd sacrificed their relationship for, was in trouble. His strategic marriage to Vanessa, meant to secure funding, was failing to prop it up. Her friend Rachel had mentioned it offhandedly weeks ago. "Did you hear the Westbrook Group is struggling with their tower? Luxury retail spaces aren't filling up. Half the tenants backed out." Victoria had filed that information away, a quiet detail in the back of her mind. Now, sitting across from a begging Julian, the delicious irony hit her. Her own fashion brand was exploding. Her flagship Manhattan store was set to open in 6 months. Bergdorf Goodman was expanding her space, and other major retailers were in a bidding war for her collections. She was exactly the kind of high-end, buzzworthy tenant that a struggling luxury development like Hudson Yards desperately needed. In fact, Julian's own people had reached out to her team twice, asking her to consider a retail space in his project. Both times, she had declined without a second thought. But now, seeing him like this, she realized he needed her professionally far more than she would ever need him personally. Her phone buzzed. It was her business manager with another offer. This one was from the Morrison Development Group, Julian's biggest rival. They were offering a prime ground floor space in their new Fifth Avenue tower. A project led by Nathan Pierce, the one developer in New York that Julian genuinely feared. A real smile, the first one he'd seen, spread across Victoria's face. "Tell me something," she said, leaning forward. "Did it work out with Vanessa? The strategic alliance that was worth more than us?" Julian's face darkened. "It's complicated." Victoria leaned back. "Let me guess. You married her for the family money?" The wedding was a society spectacle. But it turns out building a life on a business contract doesn't exactly lead to happiness. Now you're trapped. Your big project is failing. And you thought crawling back to me might fix the emptiness inside you. Julian just stared, utterly shocked. "How did you know?" "Because I know you," Victoria said, her voice soft but unyielding. "You always choose what looks good on paper, then wonder why it doesn't feel good in your heart. You did it with Vanessa. You did it with me. The difference is, I learned from it. You clearly haven't." And then he broke. Not in a dramatic, sobbing way, but something inside him just crumbled. He told her everything. How Vanessa and his own father had pressured him to end things, making the Hudson Yards deal contingent on him marrying into old money. He confessed how he'd convinced himself that success and status would be enough, and how deeply, terribly wrong he had been. Victoria listened, a flicker of old sympathy stirring within her. But the stronger part of her, the woman who had built an empire from the ashes of her heartbreak, remained unmoved. He made his choices. she had made hers. "The marriage is over," Julian said quietly. "Vanessa and I are separating. Her family is pulling their investment from Hudson Yards. The whole project might collapse." He looked at her with a desperate, pleading hope. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But Victoria, I never stopped loving you. If there's any chance, ... Victoria felt the weight of that moment. 2 years ago, she would have forgiven him in a heartbeat, just to have him back. But that girl was gone. The woman sitting in that booth now measured her worth by her own achievements, not by a man's affection. She had built something real, something beautiful from her pain. She was enough, all on her own. She reached across the table, placing her hand gently over his. Hope flared in his eyes. Then she spoke. "Julian, I don't hate you. I realize now that I'm grateful. You broke me in a way that forced me to rebuild myself stronger. Everything I am now exists because you taught me. I couldn't rely on anyone else to define my worth." She pulled her hand back. "But that doesn't mean I want you back. I don't love you anymore. I don't even think I like you very much. Oh, you're a cautionary tale." Julian's face went white. "Victoria," she continued, her voice all business now, "I'm going to sign with Morrison Development for my flagship store. Nathan Pierce gave me better terms and a better location. My brand is going to be everywhere in this city. You'll see my name on buildings and magazines, on the women at every party you attend." She stood up, gathering her things. "And every single time you see it, I want you to remember what you threw away. Not because I want you to suffer, but so maybe you'll learn to value people while you still have them." Victoria walked out into the bright New York morning. Her phone was already buzzing. Her life was full, loud, and entirely her own. Behind her, Julian sat alone, finally understanding the true cost of his choices. He hadn't just lost a woman, he'd lost a partner. 6 months later, Victoria's Fifth Avenue flagship opened to massive crowds and rave reviews. She stood in her stunning new store, surrounded by her success, and felt a deep, genuine happiness. Julian sent flowers, of course. She had them donated, just like all the others. She didn't need his regrets. She had herself, whole and unbroken. The girl who fled New York in tears was gone. In her place stood Victoria Monroe, a testament to the fact that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so spectacular that the person who hurt you becomes completely irrelevant. And that was the greatest victory. Thanks for watching.